Welcome to The Silent Verdict.
With Clara Monroe and Elias Gray.
Okay, let's talk about a photo. A single photo, taken without anyone's knowledge, that ended up costing a giant tech company more than $12,000. And no, this isn't some weird hypothetical. This actually happened.
Yep, $12,500. That's what a court in Argentina ordered Google to hand over to just one guy for just one picture, snapped by one of their Street View cars.
So you've got to be wondering, right? What in the world could be in a photo that's worth that much money? Well, the picture itself is, let's just say it's surprising, but it's the story behind it that really gets interesting. So let's get into it. All right, so let's set the scene. We're going back to 2017 in a small town in Argentina. The guy at the heart of all this, he's a policeman, and on this particular day, he's just hanging out at home, in his own backyard.
Now he's behind what he thinks is a privacy wall, you know? But what he didn't see coming was the Google Street View car rolling by. And that car has a camera mounted way up high. In a split second, click, an image is taken. And it's not just any image. It captures him naked from behind. And to make it 1,000 times worse, his house number and his street are right there in the shot. Before he has any idea what's happened, this incredibly private moment is online, it's on national TV, it goes completely viral.
You can just imagine the fallout. It was immediate and it was humiliating. He said he was ridiculed by his neighbors, by his colleagues at work. I mean, it was a total violation of his dignity. So what do? He felt like he had no choice but to take Google to court.
So the first round of this legal fight, it wasn't really about the photo. It was all about the thing that was supposed to stop the photo from being taken in the first place, his fence.
So this wall was 6.5 feet tall. Now, to give you some perspective, that's taller than most people. It was absolutely 100% a privacy fence. The whole point was so that people walking down the street couldn't just peer into his backyard.
But it wasn't high enough to block the one camera that really mattered. The one sitting on top of that Google car. It just sailed right on by and peered right over into his private space.
And this is where the story gets a little wild. The first court that heard the case, they threw it out. Completely. The judge basically said he only had himself to blame for being in, and this is a direct quote, inappropriate conditions in his own yard, and that his wall just wasn't tall enough. So at that point, you'd think, well, that's it, case closed. But it wasn't.
So, how does a case that was totally dead in the water make this incredible comeback? Well, it all boiled down to a higher court looking at the idea of privacy in a completely different way. And when you put the two rulings side by side, the difference is just, wow. The appeals court basically tore up the first court's logic. They said, no, this wasn't the guy's fault. They called it a blatant and arbitrary intrusion. See, for them, it didn't matter how high the wall was. What mattered was where the photo was taken, inside his private domain.
So what the appeals court did was pretty brilliant. They moved the whole conversation away from the fence, the physical barrier, and they focused on a much bigger idea, the fundamental principle of human dignity.
And man, the court's language here was powerful. This was the real turning point. They said the invasion of privacy was blatant and that there was no justification for Google to evade responsibility for this serious error. They weren't pulling any punches. They saw this as a huge mistake that cut right to the core of this man's dignity.
So when you boil it all down, the court was really affirming a right that I think we all get. The right to feel secure in your own home. It's this simple idea that you shouldn't have to constantly worry about some camera peering over your fence and splashing your private life all over the internet without your permission. Consent. That was everything.
And what's fascinating is how this one case, from this one guy in a small town in Argentina, actually shines a huge spotlight on a much bigger, global problem. It's a huge challenge for any tech company that works all over the world, across all these different countries and legal systems.
I mean, look at Google's own policy. They say they use cutting-edge tech to automatically blur out faces and license plates. But the court made a fantastic point. If your fancy system is smart enough to do that, how on earth does it fail to spot and blur a naked human body? It's a massive gap. The system just failed.
And let's be clear, this isn't some isolated incident for Street View. If you look back, you start to see a pattern emerging. Way back in 2010, there was a trespassing case in the US that settled for just $1. Then, in 2019,
Google paid out $13 million in a settlement over data collection. This case in Argentina, it's just the next chapter in this long, ongoing saga of tech bumping up against our right to privacy.
Now, obviously, 12.5 grand is, nothing to a company like Google. It's pocket change. So the real impact here isn't about the money. It's about the precedent. The ruling forces these giant global corporations to look in the mirror and ask a really hard question. Are we actually respecting the local privacy laws and the cultural norms in every single place we do business?
So, this whole story leaves us with a pretty heavy question, one that goes way beyond Argentina. In our world of drones, satellite images, and cameras on top of cars, that old idea of a privacy fence starts to feel a little quaint, doesn't it? It really makes you think. In the 21st century, how high does your fence really need to be to keep the rest of the world out?